Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show, and I'm glad that you could join me today. Today is going to be a mess of a show. I am moving. This is going to be the last time I'm at this particular premise. This has been a mess all around, but I definitely wanted to get a show in today. So Latham Ruth is joining me. I'm going to bring him in now because I do not want him to wait. Lath, my man, how are you doing this morning? You doing okay?
Good to see you, Jamal.
It is good to see you too. And just so the audience will know, Lath, come on, come on. I'm sorry, I was trying to get your bio. Today has been a bit of a mess.
Moving is always a mess.
Yeah,
So
this is
I feel for you, man. I feel for you.
well, I haven't nailed down an apartment yet. And so I've been floating from Airbnb to Airbnb. Latham Roof is an award-winning multimedia production or producer and broadcasting law consultant. Lath, I brought you on because of what has been taking place in regards to the U.S. in regards to Trump. So I believe this was either yesterday or day before yesterday. Donald Trump comes out and says this, which pissed a lot of people off. To put it mildly. So right here.
And we will own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. The U.S.
Leif, I want to get your take on this. I'm fascinated by this commentary by Trump on this. I have pointed out before that we can't go back to what it was in October 7th, or it didn't feel like we could go back to that. I mean, we've had Israel murder upwards of 100,000 people, if not more, 2/3 of which were women and children. They've destroyed everything. And so this notion of, okay, let's go back to normal. Okay, I don't know how you go back to normal after that. And so Trump, following Biden, who also wanted to evict the Palestinians, Biden was working behind the scenes to get Egypt and Jordan to effectively take the population into those countries. Both of those countries said no. Trump comes in and is far more open about it. Yeah, we want Egypt and Jordan to take all of the Palestinians. And on that, he piggybacked saying the U.S. will also take control of Gaza and evict the local population into surrounding areas. Again, something that everyone else has said no. Trump is now saying the U.S. is going to take responsibility of Gaza. Give me your take on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there are definitely delusions. This has been the plan or attempted goals of the Israelis since the 1950s. Whether it was by attempting to get Jordan to take the West Bank as part of it, and or Egypt to take Gaza as part of it. The 1967 war, the occupation of those territories by Israel. They also attempted then to expel the Palestinians, similarly in 1970s, over and over and over. So it is something that is impossible to achieve. And what we have seen is actually for the last 16 months, the genocide in Gaza was the other alternative that Israel has to deal with the Palestinians without giving them equal rights is to genocide them. So you have only two, if you want to maintain an apartheid state, a colony that is built on the appropriation of the land of the indigenous and exacting them out of the state, there's only two ways. You either expel them or you kill them. There's no third way. And over specifically this last 10 years, Palestinian population has already bounced back to be the majority of the people living within the area between the river and the sea that we would call Palestine. And that meant the Zionist project, after 100 years, has already failed. As long as the indigenous population is more than the colonists, naturally the state will revert back to the indigenous people. Okay, the only successful colonial projects are the ones that kill off the indigenous population or make them into a small minority, say Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand. South Africa failed as a colonial state. French Algeria failed as a colonial state because the indigenous population was larger than the colonists, period. So, and you know, one thing that we need to note from what Trump said is that he quoted for the second time the number of 1.8 million Palestinians or 1.7 million Palestinians from Gaza, which means that actually, according to the intelligence information that Emperor Trump has, the Israelis have genocided at least 500,000 Palestinians actually in Gaza, not the small number that we hear about. And that means that includes, of course, everybody that died from medical neglect, from starvation, and what have you, beyond people that died directly by the war. So I would say this is, you know, Trump just rattling the cage. He's raising the stakes to try to get a better hand at the negotiations of whatever Israel wants from Gaza. But ultimately, the Palestinians, after 100 years of this war of colonization, have yet to be defeated and or to submit to the will of the empires that have been attempting to colonize them for 100 years now.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I mean, when you think about it, he is effectively talking about taking over Gaza. Like, it's such a weird plan. I mean, because the first thought is like, well, how does the United States have control of Gaza? What right does the United States have to control this particular territory at all, in either a legal sense or any other sense? It's very strange. Saudi Arabia has effectively attacked this plan. In fact, all Muslim countries have effectively pushed back on this particular plan. Let me ask you this. Does the United States have any kind of leverage in order to do this? Meaning, do they have any capability of forcing Egypt or forcing Jordan to take the Palestinian population?
Well, look, both Jordan and Egypt are vassal states. The king of Jordan is half British, and his older brother, that's fully Arabic, was not allowed to be the king, basically. So, you know, and the United States has thousands upon thousands of soldiers inside Jordan. Jordan has zero economy in terms of exports beyond vegetables to the Gulf. So it lives off the handouts from the United States and the West. So, you know, but at the same time, accepting Palestinian refugees in Jordan will be suicide for the king. Even if he wants to appease master in the White House, this will be like shooting himself in the head, because within minutes there will be a revolution inside Jordan. And Egypt, it's very similar situation. You know, the country is hanging on a thread. It has war on all sides, in Libya, in Sudan, in Gaza. And the water is being cut off by Ethiopia, and then you had the war in the Red Sea with the cutting off of the Suez Canal revenues. But again, the state of Egypt, historically, the military is the control valve in the society, and the Egyptian military knows that this would be total humiliation if they accept. Therefore, even if Sisi wants to do it, he can't. He knows that somebody is going to shoot him in the head. Some general is going to just take him out. And the people of Sina, the Sinai Peninsula, there's not much population there. An influx of Palestinians into Sina will mean it will become Palestinian territory. The majority will be Palestinians there. Therefore, it will be, the state losing control. And as we saw over the last 100 years, anytime a neighboring country, there's Palestinians, refugees in it, it becomes grounds for rebellion or revolution from whether it's Lebanon or Jordan or so on. And so it's not something that Egypt will do, not because, again, it doesn't want to appease the White House and master in the White House, but because it's against suicide. And I don't think the Saudis can either accept it again, because, and look at what the situation they're left with now, specifically these countries that opposed the axis of resistance over the last 6 months, the military operations that Yemen, Lebanon, Iran conducted to support the Palestinians. Jordan and Egypt and Saudi were intercepting missiles and drones flying from these countries. But just a few hours ago, we heard the Foreign Affairs Minister of Jordan saying that if there's one Palestinian that is forcefully pushed towards the Jordanian territory, that there will be a declaration of war, and they're massing the Jordanian military on the border right now. Similarly, Egypt, by the way, has already massed thousands upon thousands of armored vehicles over the last few months. It's like the biggest concentration of Egyptian military in history since the last 1973 war in one place, and it's all on the border of Gaza and occupied Palestine in the Sinai Peninsula. So these two countries will have to go to war to defend themselves alone because of their stupidity and their total subservient to the Americans during the genocide, when they could have actually joined with the axis of resistance and opened those fronts and saved the Palestinians and ended the existence of the Zionist colony, period. If it was a combined attack from the axis of resistance with these two countries that actually blocked the path of liberation. So, we're moving to interesting times. I don't know if actually Trump is going to try to do this or not, but he's definitely, I love having Trump as an emperor because things are right in the open, right?
Yeah, he's honest.
He's
been very honest about what he wants.
Yeah. Biden wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And attempted to do it without telling anybody.
Yeah.
Putting that pier in the water and bringing special forces, and then it didn't work. The only reason Biden didn't do it is that they attempted to do it and they lost, and they were not able to. So it's a delusion, I think, by Trump. Somebody I saw yesterday online asked DeepSeek AI, gave them all the military and geographic coordinates and population and so forth, and previous wars in Gaza and the current war, and asked how many American soldiers would be required to occupy Gaza and to expel the Palestinians. And you're talking about over 500,000.
Wow.
Okay, so the Israelis attempted with a couple of 100,000 and they lost. So it will require at least 500,000 American soldiers to come on the ground, and they're not going to win even with 500,000.
Yeah, that's astonishing. I don't even know if America would be okay with this. Here's another clip of this, him sitting beside a war criminal. And listen to this.
Peter? Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, and they're willing to supply it. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like.
You know, I think the joke or the lie in all of this is that if he did this, that the Palestinians will be able to return. Nobody believes that Israel is going to allow Palestinians back into that territory if they are expelled from the territory. Meaning the moment that you, and I would imagine forcibly evict, ethnically cleanse Gaza, or for that matter, even the West Bank, because Israel is effectively doing very similar things in the West Bank at this point, they're not allowed back in. I mean, Donald Trump is talking about this like, well, we'll go in, we'll take the territory, we'll build up all of these hotels, there'll be Trump towers all over the place, people will love it, and then the Palestinians could come back, and there'll be world peace, and the Middle East issue will be solved. I mean, this is fantasy, correct?
Yeah, it is fantasy. And look, it's obvious that the Western elite, including the American ruling class, love Jewish people more than they love themselves or love their citizens or love their own religion or whatever it is. And since they're in so much love with Jewish people, maybe they should be the ones taking all the Jews from Palestine. Okay? They can take them back to New York, Toronto, to London, to Paris, and enjoy their love affair with them. Nobody will be accepting in our region here to forcefully displace their brothers and sisters from their own land in Palestine. And if any state does hint to approval to what Trump wants, it will be the end of that state. So this is why just a few hours ago, the Minister of War of the Zionist colony made a public statement saying that Ireland, Sweden, and Spain should be taking the Palestinians of Gaza as a punishment for their positions, public positions against the genocide in Gaza and their involvement in the international courts on this issue. So, well, if the Zionists have so much influence over Western capitals, yeah, let's take all the Zionists away anyways. Already, according to Israeli government numbers, at least 600,000 Israelis have received citizenship over the last 16 months in European states or their former colonies like Canada, the US, and so on. These are people that don't have dual citizenship before, okay? Add to it that at least 1.5 million dual citizens left already. We're talking about over 2 million Israelis already gone.
Yeah.
There's not much left. There's just 4.5 million left. Take them. Take them in the prairies. If you don't want to put them in New York, I mean, New York already is another Israel. It hosts already the other, 40% of the Jews outside Israel.
Yeah.
Take them there. Let it. It's not. This is more realistic, and I think this is where we're going. The Zionist colony has ended; its legitimacy to exist has ended, and actually, what Trump just did emphasized the acceleration in the deterioration of the colony. Right now, those statements by Trump, I think, shocked even countries like the Nazis of Germany, with their Nazi green foreign affairs minister. She's now calling it a war crime. It will be if they, apparently it's not a war crime to commit genocide in Gaza, but it's now a war crime to expel the Palestinians. So you could see that Germany, France, and Spain, all of them made statements that this isn't against international law. And so I don't know. These are the last moments we will see of legitimacy for the Zionist colony. And pretty soon, I hope actually, that the Zionists are stupid enough, Trump is stupid enough, wild, crazy enough to push the Palestinians forcefully into Jordan and to Egypt, so their vessels, regimes collapse. I hope so, because those vassal regimes have been the best guards on the border for Israel to protect its flanks in Palestine, in Jordan, and the Sinai Peninsula. Those two flanks, if they're open, those war fronts, there will be no more Israel, because already the north and is open with Lebanon, with the actual resistance ready to defeat the Zionist colony.
Do you think this is the reason that Netanyahu was in the United States? To effectively, and I guess there are two items for this. In one sense, the reporting is saying that Netanyahu was pushing Trump to go after Iran. They're coming up with this idea that Iran is trying to fast track a nuclear weapon and that they want Donald Trump to effectively attack Iran. There's one angle. The other angle has to do with the deal in Gaza, that they wanted Trump to effectively get rid of that deal. And, after that meeting, Donald Trump comes out and effectively says this. I mean, what do you think Netanyahu's influence in this is? Do you really think that Netanyahu effectively said, hey, get rid of the Palestinian population? Basically, that this is Netanyahu's idea, not Trump's idea.
Well, I mean, the man arrived at the White House with a golden pager and a real pager as a gift to Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, some people were thinking it's a joke, but I mean, the guy gave him a real pager. That's a death threat. He's telling Trump, you do as you're told, or you will be taken out. As it was a simple thing like a pager. We can do this. So, and you saw that picture of Trump, pushing the chair under Netanyahu to sit down. I mean, I wouldn't do that to my best friend if they're male. Maybe I'll do it for a friend female or my wife. But when did you ever see in your life two straight men, not gay, pushing a chair under the other one? That shows you that's the psychological, if you study that, it's clear who's the boss.
Show of dominance.
Show of dominance. Clear show of dominance. One is an alpha and the other is the beta. And the beta in this situation is the cowboy. Okay, maybe it was bareback. I don't know, cowboy. I have no idea what's the story here. Obviously, they have a lot on Trump being a sexual addict. From the stories that probably happened on the Epstein Island and the pictures and the videos of that. Remember when in his first term, they were talking about the Russians having a video of Trump peeing on golden shower on some prostitute, and they probably have those videos were not in Russia, and the Russians didn't have them. That is Epstein and the Israelis that have those videos.
I said Trump had a hooker pee on a bed because he was so angry at Obama. Just outright nonsense. So, here's another one. Yeah. Oh, please.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, here's another one where they're asking him the most operative question in the world. What legitimacy do you have to do this? Meaning,
by the Palestinians.
How, as an American president, are you saying you're going to take over a completely different territory in a completely different part of the world that you have no legal legitimacy, moral, ethical legitimacy to at all?
You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle. And it's a very, very dangerous place to be. And it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Baby?
You know, Trump is acting as if it's just magically dangerous. Like, it's just dangerous because it's dangerous, not because the war criminal standing right beside him has murdered hundreds of thousands of people. He's acting like it's just magically dangerous. This area is just so happens to be this way. Like there are traps that are coming out of the ground and whatnot. Dude, you are standing beside the war criminal that is directly responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of people, 2/3 of which are women and children. And again, this fantasy that he is going to somehow build up this territory and then what? Allow the Palestinians back in with Trump talking about this kind of long-term ownership position. Either he was given bad data, meaning either somebody explained something to him in a way that was completely jaded, or Trump is just lying. I don't know which, because it could be either, and it could be a bit of both in this. He's talking about this as being a peaceful solution. Is this a peaceful solution? I get the sense that this will be just utter chaos.
Look, when I watched this video before, I thought, the first thought I thought that was like, what a stupid journalist. She couldn't put together one question straight without having to fumble to try to find words that are not hurtful to the master, Netanyahu, and or to the boss. Somehow she couldn't get it, and then she threw in too many questions in one, and then that made it that Trump can answer whatever he wants to, and he definitely didn't answer the question.
Yeah.
He didn't, at all. He just went around it, and that shows you the training and conditioning of mainstream journalists in the West. How bad it is right now. How these journalists have been conditioned to, fail their duties. So look, truth of the matter. In 100 years from now, when you will go study geography in high school, they will draw the maps of the American Empire. And it will start from 1945, the end of World War II, and everything that fell under its domain. Okay. And none of these statelets or vassals will be considered independent. They will be all drawn within the American imperial domains. And that includes the whole Zionist colony and Palestine. Palestinians are subjects of the American empire, truthfully. Right now, Syrians are subjects of the American empire.
Right.
Also. I, as a Syrian, as a Palestinian, I should have say in who's the emperor, okay? But I don't. I mean, the problem with the American imperialism is that unlike, let's say, Rome gave citizenship to every territory it occupied, including Syria that it occupied. There was a lot of Syrian emperors, by the way, in Rome. These people don't know this. But that's the difference between, what the U.S. is trying to do as an empire and empires before that could last. The U.S. empire is not going to last because it keeps on occupying and not giving citizenship or representation to people it occupies. It only loots them and mass kills them, as is happening. Now, Is he going to do it? I don't think he can do it. I wish he tries. I hope he tries to do it. This is the best thing that we can dream about as Palestinians, is that the US finally comes to the ground of Palestine directly, so we can take out some Yankees, some gringos that have been hiding behind Israel and bombing us. You know, it'll be a joyous day when American soldiers die on the ground of Palestine. I tell you that.
How would you have asked that question? Because as you pointed out, she asked the question, like, she didn't kind of want to point out, this idea of, okay, well, you have no legal legitimacy to this. How on earth are you planning on doing this? Which would have been just one question. She asked several, all in that kind of one thing. How would you have asked that question to get to the heart of the matter?
Well, it's basically, if the question would be, under international law, Palestine would be occupied territory, Gaza would be occupied territory, and the Americans would be the occupying force. And then, what does this entail to America and American soldiers and resistance to their presence there? There's been hordes of occupiers in Palestine over the last 6,000 years. Every major empire occupied Palestine at some point, and every major empire ended its imperial era by exiting Palestine, including Britain, the last occupier before the Israelis. So, 1948 was the dual exit from Palestine and from India that ended the history of British imperialism. So I think Palestine will be also the graveyard of the American empire because of what we've seen over the last 16 months and the destruction of international order that the US is bent on.
Last question on this one, Laith. How do you think this turns out? I mean, assume for the moment that he can't do this. Because I got to be honest, I have no idea how he would go about doing something like this. But assume that he can't, meaning he cannot do this. Then what? I mean, because truth be told, look, as egregious as what Donald Trump is saying here, there is an issue. And that issue is that Israel has destroyed all of it. There is nothing for those people to go back to. I mean, we're talking about effectively place where like 80% of the territory has been destroyed, like buildings, all of that stuff is gone. Hospitals are gone, schools gone, UN buildings gone. And even to the point of killing, like I said, hundreds of thousands of people, 2/3 of which are women and children. Where do those people go back to? So I get this kind of the thought process that Donald Trump is going with. The problem is that ideally you would say, okay, well, we're going to give Palestine a state. And in addition to having Palestine have a state, we're going to build up that state. That is not part of his thought process. That doesn't seem to settle in regards to the way that he's thinking, even though many of the other countries around the area are effectively saying that Palestine needs a state. If he is not going to be able to do that, then what? Meaning, what are we looking at for this area if Trump can't do what Trump is saying he wants to do? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is the expansion of the war into the West Bank over the last 3 weeks.
Right.
Destruction of Jenin, Tul Kerem, Nablus, and all the refugee camps. The whole north of the West Bank is under a campaign that is very similar to what happened to Gaza. Total destruction and expulsion. There's almost 200,000 Palestinians from those 3 cities that are now displaced. So this is the projection of where we're going. The war, since 1948, is very simple. The issue is one side wants to create an apartheid colony with colonists coming from outside the country. The other wants to have an equal status, even if there is settlers or colonists or immigrants.
Right.
One side accepts that we're all human, equal human with no hierarchy. And the other says that there's a chosen people and a hierarchy in a human life worth. So as long as there's that dichotomy, we're going to continue to have war until one of the two sides is defeated completely. And in the situation of the Palestinians, to defeat them means to genocide them or expel them to become an insignificant minority.
Yeah.
The victory for the Palestinian does not mean the genocide and expulsion of the colonists. Just a victory of the Palestinians, just because of their numerical advance. They can live with the colonists there, just like the colonists in South Africa stayed, or what have you. It's not gonna. The Palestinians are not there try to kill Jews because of their Jews. They're trying to fight their colonizer, and if their colonizer accepts equality, then they don't need to kill them. Now, this is why over the last 16 months, Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich repeated over and over that this is a war of existence. If the Israelis do not manage now to cull the Palestinian population to an insignificant percentage of who lives between the river and the sea, there ceases to exist in Israel.
Yeah, I think people need to reconcile that. That the only way for Israel to get what it wants is to either expel or to kill the population. There is no middle ground in that. I mean, either you're going to have one man, one vote, or you're stuck with this idea of how do we create this Jewish state that evicts and eliminates the Palestinian population. Yeah, man, this is disturbing. I would be shocked if he could do this. I don't think he's going to get support internally from the country, but this has been a weird time frame that we've been living through. One last thing before I let you go, Syria. So Donald Trump has effectively said he wants to pull the U.S. out of Syria. Now, this is something that he wanted to do last time he was in office. Apparently, his own generals lied to him about something that was going on there. Trump made the decision to steal the oil. So he effectively stole the oil and occupied the area with wheat. Again, this played a large part in Assad's government collapsing. He was able to drain resources from that government. Give me your take on this. The U.S. is now saying that they're going to pull out of Syria. Why do you think this is coming about? Meaning, why do you think Trump is now, after everything that has taken place, saying, all right, we don't need to be here anymore. We can leave?
Yeah, I also don't know if he's going to do it, honestly. The oil and gas of Syria and the wheat, and by the way, the cotton of Syria, which is one of the most valuable cottons in the world, more valuable than Egyptian cotton, the quality, and the cement and so on that is in the north. All of this the only reason that he will give it up is that probably Turkey wants a cut of this. The other thing is that we need to remember the Greater Israel project. The map of Greater Israel just extends to the Euphrates, not north of it. I think the Americans will be there until Israel is on the Euphrates shores, and or the Turks have moved in their place. But they will. Part of what the Israelis and the Americans are trying to do in Syria is to break it up into fragments that are unable to be self-sufficient and therefore sovereign. So they want to cut the coast of Syria, where many of the minorities are, away from the heartland of Syria, then there would be no more exit for Syria into the Mediterranean. They also want to cut the north, east of Syria, to create this Kurdish apartheid state, so on the kind of model of Israel. And this will make it basically a country that is ungovernable, with 3 cantons at least, balkanized and insignificant, when historically Damascus and Syria were always one of the pillars of civilization and governance in the region, the whole Arabic region, for thousands of years. It's going to be, they're attempting to make sure that Syria never returns to the historical course that always was intended for it, and that's by making these cantons.
What effect do you think all of this is going to have on the Middle East? I mean, Trump has seemingly turned up the apple cart. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Biden administration was horrendous on this issue and allowed a genocide to take place over the last, 15 months, give or take. But Donald Trump is coming in, and as you pointed out, seems to be a more honest arbiter in regards to what he wants. This outrage wasn't there with Joe Biden, even though it should have been, because Joe Biden had a very similar plan, with the exception of the U.S. going into Gaza. How do you think this is going to reshape the Middle East in its entirety? Syria has already changed. Israel is trying to occupy the West Bank, or at the very least trying to take over the entirety of the West Bank. They're trying to take over all of Gaza. Donald Trump seems to have given his blessing for that takeover of Gaza. As you say, Egypt has militarized its border on the Sinai. As you pointed out, Jordan has militarized its border. Saudi Arabia has been complaining viciously about what Donald Trump is trying to do. But they've also been able to make some deal with Iran, where the hostilities between Iran and Saudi Arabia have gone down. But there's calls for a new pressure campaign against Iran by the United States. It seems that this region is getting more chaotic, not less.
Yeah, I mean, look, with the fall of Syria, for the first time since 1942, all Arabic states fell under the imperial umbrella. There's only 2 states that are contested, like Yemen and Lebanon, where there is resistance, armed resistance. Iraq partially, but the rest of the Arabic states for the first time fell back to colonial rule. And this may look very dark, but in this moment of there's no more, not one state that can lift the spirits of the Arabic people, or give them dreams of sovereignty, and this is where things are going to be uncontrollable. The birth of new movements. So we went through 80 some odd years of beginning with Syrian nationalism or Syrian unificationist efforts that got defeated, and then Arab unificationist efforts defeated, then socialist and communist defeated, and then Islamic liberationist, and now they're defeated, let's say partially. So we've gone in a full circle, and now it's going to be the birth again of a new movements with different ideologies. And I think we're going to go back to the Arab unificationist thought. And so somewhere in this mass of unrepresented population of 500 million people from Mauritania to Oman, there will be a birth of a new leader and a new movement under this domination of imperialism, and hopefully it will lead to the rebirth of the Arabic people as sovereigns.
Laith, man, thank you for this. This has gotten far more complicated, and I do appreciate you giving us a breakdown on what is happening. This was met with an astonishment, to put it mildly. And as you said, if Donald Trump tries to go through with this, it's going to be chaos. And he's not going to get what he wants. I don't even know why he thinks this is going to be some kind of cakewalk, or this is going to be some kind of better outcome. They're obviously trying to evict the population. And Trump is like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to have hotels. This beachfront property. We're going to own it. The Palestinians are going to come. This is an illusion. It's a fantasy. Laith, man, thank you for this. Laith Maroof, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcasting law consultant. He also hosts a Free Palestine TV. Check him out on that. That's on, I've seen it on Twitter. Is it also on YouTube?
Oh, yes, we're on YouTube, and you can find all the links to our socials on our website, freepalestine.video. Yeah, all our socials are there. You can donate for the content that we're producing also.
Excellent. Check him out. Check him out. Man is awesome. Laith, thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it.
Talk to you soon, Jamal.
All right. That is a disturbing outcome. Some people in my audience, Carlos specifically, I don't mean to name drop Carlos, I'm sorry, pointed out that this is fake news, that Donald Trump is not talking about expelling the population. Dude, I don't know if you just haven't been paying attention. I don't know if you have been watching what Donald Trump has been saying and what Donald Trump has been doing. But even the Biden administration wanted to do this. So this is not unique to Trump. It's not like, oh my God, Trump came in and look at what Donald Trump is doing. He's trying to move the population. Joe Biden was doing that too. You are seeing Democrats bring this up saying, oh my God, look at what Donald Trump is trying to do. Joe Biden was trying to do the same thing. Don't give me this shit that this just started under Trump. The only difference that started under Trump was this idea that the United States was going to take over Gaza. That's your difference. But the Biden administration was also trying to expel the Palestinian population. He was trying to get Jordan and Egypt to take the population into the West Bank. Donald Trump has openly said this. So you don't even have to read the tea leaves. He said it himself. Even in this speech, when he's talking about it, he's like, well, why would they want to go back? Why would they want to go back? Why would they want to go back to Gaza? Why would they want that? Now, again, this is being put in this kind of weird context as if Gaza just has traps, bear traps, trap doors, flying bombs that are somehow on pigeons that are just organic. Meaning this is not an organic process. This is not something that just happened. Somebody just a kid just got shot because the kid got shot. There's somebody holding that gun. There's somebody flying that drone. There's some soldier there that has invaded a territory that is pacifying that population with this notion of either killing or expelling. You have a fascist government that Donald Trump is sitting here with a war criminal acting as if this is some kind of great outcome. Here's the thing, though, what we're stuck with. He's not entirely wrong. I think that's the thing that people need to reconcile. Why is he not entirely wrong? He's not entirely wrong because his point of there's nothing to go back to. This entire place has been destroyed. What Donald Trump misses is that was the point. That wasn't a bug. That was a feature. The entire point of it was we're going to turn all of this to glass. We don't want these people here anyway. We don't want them in this territory. We don't want them in this area. All things being equal. Why do you think they decided to go after hospitals and schools? Why do you think they went after this notion of starvation? They did this because they wanted to create an inhospitable area, an area that was so horrible to live in that people just wouldn't live there because they couldn't live there. There are no hospitals, there's no food, there's no shelters, there's none of that stuff. So why would you ever go back to this area? It was that, creating facts on the ground. Donald Trump coming in after the fact and saying, well, hey, since Israel has destroyed everything, why don't we just take it over? Why don't these other countries accept the Palestinian population? We'll build it up. We'll have hotels and everything else. And then Palestinians can come back and have jobs. This is a fantasy. This is nonsense. Meaning you have the power to invade. You can do that. You do not have the power to create a good outcome. Those are different things. And anybody that's trying to convince Donald Trump that this is going to be love and light, they're going to see you as liberators. They're going to be throwing flowers as you walk into the area. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. It's just chaos, as opposed to putting pressure on its vassal to say, we will have a Palestinian state. We will deal with Israel and Palestine on equal terms, meaning we are not going to continue to give the billions without having some level of a push to the person who you're giving those billions to actually have a state and resolve the issue. Meaning you have the power to resolve the issue. You can't give 70 to 80% of the resources necessary for genocide and then turn around and say, well, Israel is an independent country. It can do whatever it wants. You can't do that. You can't do both of those things. Trump has the power to solve it. Trump is not going to use the power to solve it. And instead, he is going to help with this greater Israel project under this guise of humanitarian aid by evicting the population because things are so bad that we need to evict the population. Outrageous. Outrageous. One of the other things that is popping up are Democrats who now have come to the conclusion, well, hey, man, you should have picked Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris wouldn't have been this bad. And so, you should have picked Kamala Harris. And then here's the other one. Democrats are now saying we should impeach Trump over Gaza because this is such a bad idea that Trump should be impeached over this. Shut up. Shut the F up. Just shut up. The Biden administration was trying to do something very similar. The Biden administration allowed a genocide to take place over the last 15 months where women, children were being slaughtered. And Joe Biden stood there arm in arm with the war criminal that was slaughtering those women and children and old men and pretty much everybody else that was in that region. Hundreds of thousands of human beings buried in rubble, eaten by dogs, raped, for God's sake, on camera, no less. This is what we've acted to the hilt, completely slavishly subservient to that war criminal. 15 months, meaning this is not overnight. This is something that the Biden administration had backed, watched, and didn't do anything about. And when the reporting came out behind the scenes, it was clear as day that there was no pressure being applied to the Netanyahu government one way or the other. It was purely for public consumption in the United States because the public hated the fact that Joe Biden was perfectly okay with the genocide. When those kids went to protests, they were beaten, maligned, as if they were being some kind of violent protest. This is the same president that castigated those students, those kids, those heroes that threw their bodies out there for the campuses for all of these people being killed in genocide. The same president that castigated those peaceful kids that were out there marching and protesting at the campus when buildings were being burnt down in Minnesota, gave it a pass. Gave it a complete and utter pass. Yeah, the overwhelming majority of Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful, but let's be honest, some of those places were utter and entire chaos. When you're burning down a police station, the Biden administration didn't take huge issue with that. They defended the protests. Kamala Harris defended the protests. Democrats defended the protests. For the Palestinians, not so much. Not so much. A Democratic president allowed a genocide to take place on his watch with all of these other lemming liberals who gave it a pass, making this argument with Kamala Harris. She's better on this. Donald Trump is going to be horrible on this. When, for all intents and purposes, they had the same policy. So now MSNBC can go and talk to Palestinians because, after all, Trump is president. So that's okay now. So they've been doing that. And you get Wolfman Jack out here calling for Donald Trump's impeachment over this plan for Gaza. Just astonished.
And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, with a to whom it may concern message. To whom it may concern, ethnic cleansing in Gaza is not a joke, especially when it emanates from the President of the United States. the most powerful person in the world, when he has the ability to perfect what he says. Ethnic cleansing in Gaza is no joke, and the prime minister of Israel should be ashamed, knowing the history of his people, to stand there and allow such things to be said. Ethnic cleansing.
Dude, are you serious right now? Are you being serious right now? Where was Wolfman when this was taking place under Joe Biden? Where was Wolfman with his cane, stealing Al Green's name? Where was Wolfman Jack when all of this was taking place under Joe Biden? Where were any of these people when this was taking place under Joe Biden? Huh? Where were you, Wolfman? Where were you? Where were you? I didn't see you coming out here with this rage and fury about this ethnic cleansing. They murdered hundreds of thousands of people, 2/3 of which were women and children, under your president. Under your president, Wolfman. Yours. All of the sound and fury that's coming out now. Where was the sound and fury coming from the Democrats when this was taking place under Joe Biden? And when the people raised their voices to point that out, liberals, shh, we have to get Trump, we have to get Joe Biden elected. We can't say that. We can't have the sound and fury about a genocide taking place on our watch. But now, we have Wolverine here talking about this is ethnic cleansing, and ethnic cleansing is not a joke. No shit, Sherlock. Ethnic cleansing is not a joke. But apparently you all didn't see the issue when your president was in office. But now that Trump is in office, oh, you can rattle and shake and you can wave your cane in the air about how bad this is. Shut up. Shut up. You had your chance. And not just had your chance. If you would have had the sound and fury, you and the rest of your party, if you were willing to talk to Palestinians, this is the same party that wouldn't even allow a Palestinian on stage at the DNC convention after the uncommitted vote had taken over all of these countries or all of these states in America. Meaning in many of these states, you had 20% voting non-committed or uncommitted for the US president. And they wouldn't even allow a Palestinian on stage. Wouldn't even bring it up. Kamala Harris, I'm sticking with Joe Biden's policies. There's nothing I would have done differently. There's nothing I will do differently. That was the position of the Democratic Party. And yet, without a shadow, without even a hint of awareness of all of this happening on their watch, he can come out and give this speech. He can come out and give this speech. My mom always told me that she never wanted me in politics. She said, I never want you to be a lawyer, and I never want you to be a politician. These people are liars, and I don't necessarily want you to go out there and lie for a living. There is a level of theatrics that are associated with this that is frankly disgusting. That's frankly disgusting. I would have welcomed Wolfman giving this speech during the time Joe Biden was president. And ironically, Kamala Harris might have even won if she was willing to give that speech. If she was willing to give that speech. But they weren't willing to give that speech. Joe Biden literally was trying to get and evict Gaza or the Gazans out of that area. Literally. Go back and look it up. It was clear as day. It was being reported. He wanted to go to Syria. I'm sorry, to either Jordan or for the matter Egypt. Both told him to go kick rocks. Both. Get the F out of here. We're not doing that. And as you heard Laith, they've militarized their borders because what they know is that Israel's plan is to expel those people out of the region. Donald Trump is just trying to facilitate it with this kind of humanitarian edge to it. I'm pointing out, and my issue here is that Wolfman didn't have any of this to say during the Biden administration. Democrats as a whole did not have anything to say during the Biden administration. MSNBC was not showing Palestinians during the Biden administration. And now that Donald Trump is in office, oh, now we can call a genocide a genocide. Now we can talk about this because Donald Trump is in office. Shut up. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. My heart goes out to the Palestinian cause, but my heart went out to them while Joe Biden was in office. It had nothing to do with the president that was in office. It was what we were doing, what we were paying for was my issue with this. Wolfman now talks about this after the fact. Now that Trump is in office, now they have a license to bring this up. Just outrageous. Out-effing-rageous. I want to bring in my man. I'm sorry, Garland. I'm screaming and my mic is going down from me screaming. Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is host of his YouTube channel on Garland Nixon. He's a political analyst, journalist, and a damn good friend of this show. How you doing, my man? You doing okay, Garland?
Doing great. Thanks for inviting me, Jamal.
Oh, always, man. I'm sitting here screaming at. This is Al Green. I'm going to get your take on this. Now that Trump is in office, Trump has come up with this idea to take over Gaza and to expel the population of Gaza into Egypt and Jordan. Now, in fact, I'll just show you the clip. Trump is talking about this like, well, we're going to build hotels. We're going to build up the area. This is going to be great. And they're going to go back to this great area. I don't know why they will want to go back to this area now. I mean, he's saying this as if the Palestinians are going to be allowed back into the area after they're expelled from the area. Nobody believes that. On top of that, Egypt and Jordan has already said, okay, this is nonsense. We're not going to allow this. This is unacceptable to us. And yet Trump is effectively saying America is going to take over Gaza. Not effectively saying, he is saying the U.S. will take over Gaza. The population will be expelled. The area will be rebuilt. That's the way he's talking about it. Nobody believes that they do this. So right here, this is Trump making this speech. And I want to get your take on something specific in regards to Democrats. Because whereas before, as I pointed out to the audience, they wouldn't even allow a Palestinian on the DNC convention stage. Wouldn't even allow it. And this is after an uncommitted vote all throughout the United States that made it very clear this is a major issue for us. They wouldn't do it. After the election, you had millions, I think it was like 20 million people or something like that, that would have voted for a Democrat, did not vote for a Democrat because they didn't necessarily want to deal with the genocide. This was based on Drop Zone News reporting of this issue. Trump comes out, says this, and all of a sudden Democrats howl. They're screaming. They're, oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump is doing this. And as I keep pointing out, your president sat by and allowed a genocide for 15 months. 15 months. And now all of a sudden you have this sound and fury coming out of the Democratic Party like, oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump is doing this. This is Trump coming up with this harebrained scheme. It's not going to work, by the way, but I'll play it.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. The U.S. will take over the Gaza.
You know, what's wild about that is on some level, I understand why he's saying this, if that makes sense. Meaning, if you're, let's say, let's give the best view of this, the best, the most humanitarian view of this. And you look at what's taking place and you say, wow, there's nothing for those people to go back to. All of that area has been destroyed. Now, mind you, he's on stage with the war criminal that did the destruction, that killed all of those people. But put that to the side for the moment. I'm standing beside the war criminal. They have destroyed everything. There's nothing to go back to. There's no hospitals. There's no schools. There's no buildings. So we need to rebuild the area. We can't go back to normal. Okay, I get that logic, meaning I get the framing of that, of we can't go back to normal. We can't go back to status quo, not after everything that has effectively happened. Something new needs to take place. The issue is that Trump's conclusion is, well, let's just evict the population. Let's just take it all over. Hey, we have beachfront property. My issue with all of this, more so than anything else, is yes, this is a stupid idea that's going to create chaos. My issue is the way the Democrats are dealing with this. They're acting like this is a new norm, like this is something different than what their president themselves were doing. And I was showing the audience, who I derided as Wolfman Jack. That might be brutal, but right here, Al Green. Listen to the sound and fury coming out of Democrats now that Trump is in office. I find this to be outrageous.
In Gaza is not a joke, especially when it emanates from the President of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, when he has the ability to perfect what he says. Ethnic cleansing in Gaza is no joke, and the Prime Minister of Israel should be ashamed, knowing the history of his people, to stand there and allow such things to be said. Ethnic cleansing has been a crime against humanity.
Garland, I want to punch that screen. I want to punch that screen. So, like, I want to break this TV here in this. Give me your take on this. I'm going to scream.
Two things, but very quickly on Trump's things, the things that he's saying. Even if Trump meant it in good faith, the guy he's standing next to never acts in good faith. You know what I mean? If Netanyahu says, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we just move them out for a little while? We'll rebuild some nice places for them to live in, and then we'll bring them back." We already know that he doesn't mean that, even if Trump did. Not that any of them do or don't. Okay, but the other part of it is this: my dealings and actions towards Trump assertions, I've come to the conclusion that I might already told you that this 4 years for Trump, I'm going to ignore what he says and only react to what he does. You know what I mean? Because Trump, every other week, he's going to come up with some harebrained cockamamie scheme. We're going to go to Mars, Pluto, Venus. No, you know what I mean? We'll move them out and bring them back. We'll drain the oceans and fill it with oil. Who knows what the hell he's going to say every other week, right? Something preposterous. And then, of course, all of us and everybody on the news go, "Oh my God, did you hear the latest thing that Trump said?" And while we're jumping around over that, he goes and he says something else preposterous. And we never really deal with Trump because we're so busy dealing with the next crazy thing that he said that we kind of ignore what he's doing. Yeah. So I'm going to focus on the last thing he did. And rather than his next harebrained, wild-ass assertion of what he's going to do next. But I understand it is a reasonable conversation when Netanyahu's in, but none of it's happening. There's no chance. The Muslim countries, no possibility. MBS said a while back, look, if I go along with this stuff, they'll kill me.
Yeah.
And overthrow my government. He said way back. Here's the other thing about the Democrats. Anthony Blinken said this at the beginning of the conflict.
Yes.
They didn't have a problem with it then. Blinken, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we just move them all into Egypt in tents? Or what he even said was worse. It's like, we'll just throw them into the desert in a bunch of tents, and whatever happens to them, who gives a crap? Let's go back, get back to that. And the Democrats were like, yawn. I don't see anything.
By the way, this was Biden's plan.
Yeah.
Biden wanted to do the exact same thing.
Actually worse.
That's what pissed me off about this.
It was worse.
Yeah.
He just said, send them out into the Sinai desert in tents, and we'll do. He didn't even assert, albeit false, that they had a long-term plan to move them back. He just said, remember, it was like, we'll move them all out and they'll be stay in the desert, in the Sinai, whatever.
The desert.
Democrats were fine with that. It didn't matter. So here's what we see. I'll put it this way. Russiagate. One of the things to me that Russiagate did was it came up, and we talked about sometimes they come up with these preposterous schemes of what Russia did, right? I think Russia, they're going to hack into, remember this? They're hacking into a small electric plant in New Hampshire or something like that.
Yeah.
They're trying to use the Uhuru because they figure if they get a single city council member in St. Petersburg, the whole country falls, right? And we're like, this makes sense to you guys, right? They created a party that's not rational. They're not rational actors anymore. You know what I mean? They might say anything on a given day, and it's nothing but an anti-Trump cult. So the minute Trump came into office, they suddenly decided that they were the party of morality and they could take the moral high ground on
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
So now if Trump says, well, remember that thing that Biden did? Yeah, well, I think I want to do it. Oh, I believe this guy. And he was, let's be honest. Did you see the look on his face? He was angry. He truly was upset. He was furious over that.
Yeah.
Why? Because Trump was doing it. Their positions on Gaza are unrelated to Gaza. Their positions on Ukraine are unrelated to Ukraine. Their positions on USAID. I've heard people screaming and yelling about USAID. They never even heard of USAID 3 weeks ago.
I showed the protests yesterday. They are literally out there protesting for regime change. We need USAID. I can't believe Donald Trump got rid of the USAID. And it's like, okay, so you're effectively pushing for regime change. They spent millions in Georgia, millions in Romania, billions in Georgia, Romania, billions to overthrow the government of Ukraine, billions apparently in Slovakia to try to knock over Fico, meaning US aid was a front for effectively affecting CIA or US policy all throughout the world. And now they're complaining about how media, the quote unquote independent media all throughout the world has been damaged by Donald Trump getting rid of US aid. Think about what we're saying.
Here's the sad part about it. If that were truly their position, even though I would disagree with it, would make sense. Most of them don't even know what the hell USAID is.
Nope.
Their complaints are unrelated to USAID. It is nothing but an anti-Trump cult. If Trump came out and said, USAID is fantastic, it's wonderful, we've got to send more money to the USAID, these Democrats would be like, the rank and file, the ones in Congress would be, yay, this is great, that was wonderful, right? The ones on the street would oppose it. USAID is terrible. It's horrible. It must be stopped. Why? Because Trump's in favor of it. If Trump flipped tomorrow, I've changed my mind. I think we got to double the budget. USAID they have created effectively a mindless anti-Trump cult that their only job, they've been taught through Russiagate that their only job is to oppose Trump because everything Trump does is bad. So therefore, it's not a political party anymore. The Democratic Party is not. There has to be some rational consideration to their policies. There has to be some political or economic or foreign policy positions. When your only position is, if that guy's for it, I'm against it. That's not politics, so they're not a political party. That's my position. It's absurd, to watch them do this. Yeah, it's crazy.
Pure reactive. It's just relative to whatever Trump is doing. And that's what I was pointing out yesterday. I was like, how do you not have a core? Like, meaning if you and I are in different political parties and something comes up where you agree with me on, then you just agree with me. We can agree and we can move on this issue. That's not the way they think, though. In their mind, well, Donald Trump is for this, so we have to be, by definition, against it, even if it's something good. Meaning, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. It doesn't matter if it's something Joe Biden wanted to do before. If Donald Trump is now doing it, we have to be against it. That is one of the most bizarre things in the world. There is no moral core. There's no center that you can put your finger on and saying, okay, this is what the Democratic Party represents. It is whatever Trump is against. It is the most bizarre thing in the world. Adding to that, Bakari Sellers, who, I got to be honest, I never liked. I always thought he was incompetent, knuckle dragging liberal, who, when he's on CNN, you know exactly what he's going to say, whatever the Democratic Party effectively wants him to say. And now he is also up in arms. But listen to the argument he's making here. Well, there was a choice between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Donald Trump or Kamala Harris would have never done this. Despite the fact, as I pointed out, this was Biden's policy. And Kamala Harris said she wouldn't do anything different on the policy than what Joe Biden was effectively doing. This, what Donald Trump is doing, is Biden's policy.
I feel sad and angry and scared for our communities. For months, we warned about the dangers of Trump at home and abroad, but our calls largely went unheard. Trump's illegal calls for ethnic cleansing are horrific, But as on so many issues, Democrats had a chance to persuade voters they were better than the alternative, and they blew it.
They
think
sound
that
ridiculous.
That statement is frustrating. That statement is ill-timed. That statement is petty. I really would call it what I want to call it, but my mom's watching the show. For me, it's if you actually voted one way or withheld your vote, you should own it.
Mhm.
There were two choices in this campaign. It was extremely clear. You had Kamala Harris going forward, who recognized that Hamas has no place in governing Palestine, but she also knew, or Gaza, but she also knew that the Palestinian people had the right to human dignity. She also knew that Israel wanted safety and security, deserved that, had the right to defend itself. And we would have been in a much better situation. There was not a question about ethnic cleansing if Kamala Harris would have been the president of the United States.
You are so full of shit. You are so full of shit. This guy right here, Bakari Sellers, he is so full of shit. Either he is not paying attention to the media, or he has this memory hole of what was taking place under Joe Biden. Keep in mind, this guy is saying this knowing full well that Biden was the one that presided over hundreds of thousands of people being slaughtered. His party presided over that. Donald Trump wasn't in office. His party. Joe Biden was contributing 70 to 80% of the bombs, the military, the intelligence, the murder that was happening in Palestine. His president was doing that. And yet he sits here with the neck saying, well, I mean, we had two obvious choices. Kamala Harris recognized the Palestinians were people, and now Donald Trump is trying to ethnically cleanse. So is your president. So is your president. Give me a take on this, Golly. I'm sorry. I am so annoyed.
I'm with you. You know, it is difficult to watch the irrationality of the Democrats and their representatives right now. It is difficult, and it's easy to understand why this party collapsed.
Yes,
you know, politically, when you watch them, because they're not rational. It's kind of like when you listen to their discussions of Ukraine. Putin just woke up one day, and because it went from, you know, he hated democracy, so he attacked. He didn't want. I've heard this. He didn't want a democracy on his border, right? Or you know, things like that. But when you hear the irrational things they've said about foreign policy, et cetera, right? It all aligns. There's no concern whether or not what they're saying aligns in a historical context or political context. It's simply, let's say things that benefit us. We're the good guys. Other people are the bad guys. We will ignore what happened 2 days ago, what happened 2 hours ago, 2 minutes ago. It doesn't matter. We'll say the things necessary to paint us in the light as the good guys, and other people are the bad guys. And you watch an irrational party. I watched this DNC videos from this DNC conference or something they had the other day, and it was just pure. It was insanity. It was absurdity, which shows the party's kind of dead. I don't see a path back for them in the midterms or anywhere else, because they can't come to grips with reality. They're going to go into the midterms and they're going to continue to preach these absurdities, and people are going to be like, you're not making sense. You know, literally like 5 days after Donald Trump came to office, they started griping about the price of eggs and putting all of this stuff online. Look at the price of eggs. And I'm like, and I saw one people like, oh, yeah, if Donald Trump says this, the price of cars are going to go up because of Mexico. And I'm like, the price of cars literally went up 60%, 40 to 60% in 4 years under Biden. And 5 days after Donald Trump goes to office, you're complaining that the price of cars may go up due to tariffs and eggs may go up. You're going to ignore all these bad things that happened under Biden and simply say, under Trump, potentially bad things could happen similar to Biden. And you're like, you have no historical context. You have no political thoughts of mind. And you actually believe that 5 days after Donald Trump took office, eggs went up and it's his fault. And these were the same people that when you would say, well, things went up really bad under Biden. Well, he was just working to try to fix things after 4 years of terrible Trump. They're no longer rational actors. And it's almost like when you hear a little 3-year-old say something and you just go, yeah, and you shake your head and you smile and you hand him a piece of candy or something because you know he doesn't know any better. At this point, it is sometimes horrifying to watch stuff like that. You know what I mean? You're like, I can't watch it. I start seeing that stuff and I got to turn the channel because, like you said, I'll be snatching the TV off the wall and throwing it out the window if I watch that madness.
It is aggravating, to put it mildly. I mean, you had people like me, like yourself, screaming, saying, there's a genocide being committed. And you're doing this on your watch, meaning you are paying for this to take place. And you're standing there as this takes place. And as evidence to the fact that the public wasn't necessarily on board for it, Joe Biden would lie to the public. If Israel goes into Rafah, all hell will break loose. Hey, if they continue to starve their local populations, maybe we won't give them weapons in a month. I mean, this stuff was coming up, not because Joe Biden was really doing anything, but because he understood that his base, or at the very least people who would typically vote for Democrats, didn't like the fact that we were backing a genocide. I mean, for God's sake, they were calling the man Genocide Joe, which gets across their perspective of what Joe Biden was effectively doing. So, it's like now after the fact, you get these talking heads, these depraved degenerates like Bakari Sellers coming and say, oh, this is unhelpful that Uncommitted is pointing this out. No, it's very helpful. I think it's very helpful. And it is pursuant to this point that they are now taking issue with a policy that their own president had. And instead of them owning that, well, they don't own that. They act as if nothing took place over the last 15 months. Joe Biden was not in office in the last 15 months as this genocide was taking place, and that the world started the moment that Donald Trump took office. This is nonsense. This is nonsense.
It's and on so many, I mean, on everything. You know what I mean? It's like you're watching a party that's completely irrational, and you just ask yourself, how do they recover? You know what I mean? How do they're not rather than like trying to figure out why. Yeah, I mean, they got blown out. Yes. If you listen to them, you would think that they lost, by a hair. They lost every one of the swing states. And their reaction is to get angry at the voters. Oh, I bet people are sorry they voted for Trump now. I don't know anybody who says, I wish I'd have voted for Kamala Harris. Now, I don't know if you saw, they released the NBC 60 Minutes thing, and she looked like a complete lunatic on that. Yes. She's babbling like an idiot. I don't know anybody who says, I wish I'd have voted for that. Nobody. People are dealing with Trump, and they knew what they were getting with Trump. They knew what they were getting. How bad are you when people look at Trump and they're like, well, yeah, he's going to say crazy stuff and tweet madness and things like that, but at least maybe we won't get nuked. That's all. I didn't vote for Trump, but all I thought is, well, at least maybe we won't get nuked. Yeah, that's kind of a start. Yeah. But the reversal, on so many things and I'm with you. On a lot of things, you can just shake your head. But on Gaza, the idea that people that were committing a genocide can look at a guy and say, well, he's going to do ethnic cleansing. I'm like, in a way, thank God for Donald Trump. That was the only thing that could suddenly turn the Democrats in favor of the Palestinians. Donald Trump getting elected is the only thing. And now you know what the problem is? Here's what everybody knows. If Donald Trump goes out in 4 years and a Democrat comes in and says, hey, I think we should go in and just kill all the Palestinians, the Democratic Party will stand up and cheer again.
They'll be okay with it. Yep. This was it. What's wild about it? I came to this realization when Obama took office, and maybe after Obama took office. Because if you remember, when George Bush was in office, Democrats were anti-war. When George Bush was in, they hated the Iraq War. They thought Bush was a war criminal. You would have Keith Olbermann giving these monologues night after night after night about how bad George Bush is. And then Obama gets in, and they all shut up. And Obama goes on to these drone wars where 60 to 70% of the people he was killing were civilians. And he did this for years. He dropped so many bombs that they were running out of bombs. Democrats had nothing to say. All of them shut up. All of them were quiet about it. You could, it was like quiet as a church mouse. And then Trump gets in office, and all of a sudden you hear him scream again. And what makes this even weirder is when Donald Trump says, I want to pull out of Syria, or I want to make deals with North Korea to stop them from firing missiles. That's what they get upset over. Because wait a minute, you're upset with the guy that he wants to bring down hostilities with North Korea. You're upset that he wants to bring the military out of Afghanistan. You're upset that he wants to pull out of Syria. What the hell is wrong with you people? You're right. It is entirely reflexive to whatever Trump is doing, whether it's good or bad. One of the other items that came up was Schellenberg. So, as pretext, or just as a background, the audience would know that Donald Trump ended USAID, or at the very least ended USAID's capability of overthrowing governments outside of State Department, because apparently Rubio is saying that the USAID is going to be under the State Department. And the argument that they effectively made was, how on earth do you have this entity that is running parallel to US policy, meaning it's US policy, but it's not necessarily connected to the White House. They go out with a mission overthrowing governments, whether it's Georgia, Slovakia, Romania, or Ukraine. They've effectively have this regime change process that creates color revolutions in the countries that we don't necessarily like. Schellenberg, the one who released the Twitter files, came out and said something else, though. Listen to what he's saying here. And this gives, because I pointed out that part of the reason that Trump went after USAID is because USAID is a similar device that A, tried to get rid of him, but more to the point of trying to get rid of him, meaning the same people who back USAID and back these overthrow of governments were the same liberals that wanted to get rid of Donald Trump. I also point out that many of the people that Donald Trump may be able to work with abroad, let's say like a Fico or Carl Gugescu, at the point where he wins that election, keep in mind they destroyed the Romanian election, the Georgian Dream Party, meaning countries that have taken this thing of, we don't want to go to war with Russia, we're sick of these wars, the European Union needs to be different. Those countries have been under massive amounts of pressure to get rid of those leaders. The French-born spook that served as the Georgian president, for example, that was working with the European Union to destroy the Georgian Dream Party, or for that matter, the Georgian government. That spook is still calling herself president of Georgia, despite the fact she's not president of Georgia. And the catch becomes, okay, well, where's all of this money coming from to try to affect these regime change conflicts, or to put pressure on these governments, or this control of media? It came from the State Department. It's obvious. Schellenberg says something else, though. He went further and said that the CIA was instrumental, or through USAID, trying to get rid of Donald Trump in the Trump impeachment hearings. This is Schellenberg.
You have this new piece on Substack that the USAID and the CIA helped orchestrate Trump's impeachment.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, it's a crazy story. I mean, you might forget that, the House of Representatives impeached President Trump in December of 2019. Many people may not remember that it was a CIA analyst who was left over from the Obama White House who wrote the memo that led to the impeachment. It was all based on hearsay. The person had not actually been in the room with Trump. Nonetheless, this memo that he wrote relied heavily on a report done by an organization funded by USAID. In fact, its initial founding funding, I mean, now it's tens of millions of dollars, had gone into this group called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, a name that's not very memorable, OCCRP, but it was basically created as an extension of the State Department and then of USAID. And as you know, Jesse, this is very serious to be involved in an effort to do regime change at home, as we've been discovering as the files have come out, what Elon Musk has been doing. We know that USAID was really about regime change abroad. It was a kind of public-facing part, regime change operation like CIA, but not covert, more overt. Well, now you see a similar blowback, just like they did censorship abroad and brought censorship tools back home. They were doing this sort of thing abroad, creating a predicate essentially for Trump's impeachment. So I think it's just one of many revelations that we'll see coming out in the next few weeks.
USAID was in.
That is not shocking to me. That's not shocking to me. Give me a take. I mean, and by the way, there's something like that in the UK. When Jeremy Corbyn was running for office in the UK, there was this little group that was paid by the British government in order to go after like Russian disinformation and stuff like that. And they decided that their objective, or part of their objective, was effectively to go after Jeremy Corbyn. So this notion of this kind of fifth column working in a government to undermine the government itself is a real thing. And apparently USAID was party to that. Give me a take on this.
It doesn't shock me because, one of the things we've been discussing and I've been discussing for years now, is that, you know, whatever they do abroad, they're coming back home, right? That the war on terror and all these terrible things they were doing, it's like we have to go on terrorists, and now, oh, domestic terrorism, we need domestic terrorist laws, right? All of the things they were doing abroad, they were bringing home. So, and it only makes sense that the regime change machine, this was all, there was this gigantic machine with tentacles all over the place, and that this machine would operate the same way here as it does everywhere else. And not only does it not surprise me, it confirms what I already believe, that the entire machine, you know, I remember when Tulsi Gabbard said, I'm going to run, and I watched the whole, she went after Kamala Harris. And from here to these, there were articles in Germany and in France and in Europe and Australia. Tulsi Gabbard worked for the Russians, just like that. Overnight, all of the same articles came out all over the West. And it's like, well, it's obvious that the tentacles of this machine have sent out the emails. All right, here are the talking points. Boom, 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 boom. Everybody go with them, right? There was this giant machine. And that's all it was. This machine was after Trump, and they used everything they had to go after them. And yes, there was what we're looking at here was a long-term coup attempt. It began as a preemptive coup attempt before Trump went in. And it was just a coup attempt that was, the whole Five Eyes were part of it. And that's all we're looking at. The more they dig, the more they'll find. The more they look into this machine, the more they'll find, because every single part of it was involved. Whether it was trying to impeach Trump, whether, if you remember, Tulsi's a Russian bot. When what's his name? When Bernie started doing well, the Russians loved Bernie, and Bernie went right along with it. Jeremy Corbyn, all of those, that one machine was part of it. And this is what the machine did. And the more you dig, you'll find the same thing over again. I am not in any way surprised. In fact, I feel like have one of my beliefs, they weren't a belief. You could see it. Yeah. You know what I mean? You could see it. And they always acted in unison. So the other thing I think that aligns with this, you know, they found out, what were they giving, $8 million to Politico, right? That in the same way that we found out that 90% of the media in Ukraine was funded by USAID, and we just found 8 million to Politico, you're going to find, apparently there was money to the New York Times. You're going to find the same thing, money to all of these news organizations in the U.S. Because the machine operates the same way in every country, and they were paying
independent, as they call it, news organizations, despite
that's
all this money from the State Department.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. As soon as they came in and they started looking around, and I said, I hope they start going to the CIA, go into NSA, go, etc., and start looking at the emails between them and NBC News and MSNBC and all of those. Start looking at the contacts between these government entities and the news, and you will find that they were regularly and daily coordinating these things. Well, remember, we discussed this when Ken Delanian gets fired from the LA Times because he's sending his stories to the CIA first. As soon as he gets fired, NBC News hires him. And we were like, well, clearly they hired him because he works for the CIA. And that's what we're looking at. Hey, start looking at Ken Delanian's emails between him and the government. I kind of think you'll find some suspicious activity.
Yeah, that's not a bug. That's a feature. That's, you know, that's kind of just part of the process. It is amazing to me that they're still going with this idea that Donald Trump is upsetting independent media because USAID was effectively blocked. Not putting two and two together, say, well, wait a minute. If you're getting this much money from the US government, it doesn't anyway control the story that is coming out of the papers that are getting the money. And, you know, when they attacked us for working on Sputnik and RT, they said, well, that's Russian media because Russia is paying for this media. Okay, well, don't the same rules apply? If you're telling me that 90% of the media in Ukraine is coming out of the US, then you're just telling me that the State Department has a megaphone in Ukraine. And it's not just Ukraine, it's all across the world. That's the part that people need to kind of reconcile. USAID has been put money all of these places, all of these journalistic outlets. And it's like, well, why do you think they're doing that? Well, they're doing it because they want to support independent media. You're an idiot if you think that. You're an idiot if you think that. So this is
Can I add
part
one other thing?
please.
I think they're going to find a couple of things. They're going to find that the State Department, that the tentacles of the U.S. government was into so-called independent media, corporations, social media, et cetera, to a level that people will be able to sue. That it will be actionable. I mean, you know, when you look at the things, what happens if you find out, let's say Jimmy Dore finds out that they ran that story, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist, but what happens if Jimmy Dore finds out that that came from the U.S. government? Doesn't he have a right to sue the U.S. government for deliberately violating his constitutional right? And on and on and on. There will be thousands of people, possibly even you and I, who find that actions were taken against us deliberately by the U.S. government, and they were, proposed that it was an independent news organization or corporation when it wasn't.
I really wish that they fought on First Amendment grounds this idea of getting rid of these media organizations. And even for the YouTube stuff, like, I know people make this argument, YouTube is a private company. Fair enough. But, we have all sorts of rules for private companies in the United States. Like, if you go to a bakery, the person can't say, well, you're black, so I'm not going to give you a cake. Or if you're handicapped, that you can't come into a building because you are in a wheelchair. Based on our laws, there needs to be provisions for people who are handicapped to be able to get into businesses. There are provisions that you can't necessarily ignore. Serving a person because of a particular race. If you open the door to a building and you're on public street, or for that matter, you're dealing with the public, there are certain laws and rules that are associated with that, even if it's your private business. And I think the same thing should be true for either YouTube or Twitter. When you have this medium as our way of engaging and interacting with one another. Like the moment that you have this kind of governmental control, where the government comes in and says, we don't want you to say this, or we don't want you to say that, doing this kind of end run around the First Amendment, I think you've come into issues. And it doesn't seem like the legal system, the laws, or anything is caught up with that fact of the government trying to do an end run, meaning the government accepts, okay, well, we can't do anything about the First Amendment, but because they're private entities, now we can effectively put pressure on the private entity to do the job that the United States government is not allowed to do in a legal sense. It's outrageous. I would love for something like that to take place. I don't know how far Trump is going to look into it, but I agree with you. They need to look, man, we spent $300 billion in Ukraine on the low end. You can imagine how much of that money in a leaky bucket is going to get ferreted out to other places that it wasn't intended to go. So yeah, one of the first things that Trump should do is an audit of that money that went out, how that money was being spent. And I love the fact that he shut down U.S. aid, and they started looking to, okay, well, what has USAID been doing? Effectively doing an audit of USAID. And part of it may be because what Trump is hearing out of Schellenberg, they were instrumental in some way of working to get Trump out of office during that impeachment hearing.
And
so,
you know what else would be interesting in that? This is something else that will be interesting. Whether or not, and I think the answer is yes, actual members of Congress knowingly participated in a coup attempt, knew that it was coming from the CIA, talked with Adam Schiff. Oh, gee, I wonder why that guy might have been pardoned. But imagine if you find out that Adam Schiff and others, Adam Schiff was leading it. If when they were involved in the whole Russiagate scheme, were regularly talking with members of the intelligence community, knowing that it was illegal. And deliberately hiding that they were talking with the intelligence community, knowing that if the CIA is involved in, and if it got out that the CIA was involved in the impeachment, how could the CIA be involved in the impeachment, and the Democrats that were running the impeachment hearings didn't know that? That's not possible, is it? So, which would mean that they would be subject to criminal proceedings. And might I add, that's RICO, isn't it? Because you are violating the law, but you're violating the law in furtherance of a broader criminal conspiracy. That's specifically RICO violations. So you're looking at a broad criminal conspiracy. So not only would they be in violation of the law, which is actually very ironic considering that they went after Trump and some of his people in Atlanta using RICO laws, but they were definitely using a broader criminal conspiracy. This thing could rip the United States, particularly the Democrats, but sure some of the Republicans, could rip Congress to pieces because a whole lot of them were involved and they knew what the hell they were doing.
51 intelligence officials. And you know, what people don't quite get with the 51 intelligence officials thing is that they were interrupting a presidential election in doing so. Meaning the email that was released pointed out, I think it was Brennan that got that email.
Yeah.
I have a clip of it where he effectively said, hey, this is great because it's going to give Joe Biden a talking point when he's on the debate stage with Donald Trump, because Trump was going to bring up this notion that, look, the Hunter Biden laptop shows all of this corruption that is taking place by the Democratic Party. And so if we say that 51 intelligence officials come out and say that this isn't true, that this has the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, then we give Joe Biden a talking point when that comes up in the debate. And that is exactly what happened. It came up in the debate, and Joe Biden says, well, 51 intelligence officials says that that's Russian disinformation. Well, it wasn't. It was a true story that they were effectively lying about. What I'm trying to point out, though, is that that is the intelligence services literally getting involved in order to undercut what one of the other presidential candidates was effectively saying and going after his opponent right here. So this is one of the emails that came up right here. So right here, leaked email. John Brennan to Michael Morrell. It says, okay, Michael, add my name to the list. Good initiative. Thanks for asking me to sign on. Michael Morrell said, hey, John, can I add your name to the list? We'll be adding Leon, Sue, Gordon, Jay Johnson, George, Lisa Monaco, Mike Rogers today, and working on adding Dan Coates, Mike Rogers, and Tom Bossert, and a lot of other IC career folks. It says trying to give the campaign, particularly during the debate on Thursday, a talking point to push back on Trump on this. So you get John Brennan talking behind the scenes saying, hey, we need to be able to help Joe Biden in the debate. And the way we can do that is by getting all of these intelligence officials to lie that the laptop was Russian disinformation. They knew they were lying. They were just putting it out there in order to help one of the other candidates. Now, whether this was the CIA working specifically under the auspices of the organization, or whether this was a fifth column that decided to use their CIA credentials and intelligence credentials to do this, is less relevant to me. From my standpoint, they pulled a massive psyop on the American public on a debate stage, one of the largest watched debates or watched television appearances, especially in the political context, that you would see over the course of 4 years. They took that platform, that stage, to put out that disinformation. And when they put that disinformation out, if you remember, the New York Post gets put in Twitter jail. You get media organizations having a complete blackout for almost a year on that issue. And then they turn around and say, well, by the way, the story is true. And not just true, prosecutions start using the laptop to go after Hunter Biden. So it's like they lied. Now, Brennan and the other spooks have found a home on MSNBC, of course. And in finding a home on MSNBC, of course, Joy-Ann Reid, because as you pointed out, there is no moral or ethical core to the Democratic Party. They're a cult that is purely reflective to Trump. And so now they have spooks on MSNBC saying stuff like this.
Hillary Clinton was dragged through the mud, and in some cases, Republicans still complain about her having some C-marked material inside of the information in her inside of her server, the server that she had at home. There's been no allegation that she's ever disclosed or exposed CIA assets in this way, and it does seem that part of this is their sort of anti-DEI crusade. It doesn't make sense to me, if this is the plan, and we don't know this is why they are looking for this list, that you want to have only non-ethnic people in the CIA, that you don't want to have people with a background that is relevant to the countries that they're going to be working in.
Reed is talking about DEI programs. Effectively, Brennan is saying, hey, when I was in the CIA, I worked for diversity in the CIA. I guess my issue with this is more so they have gotten so thoroughly comfortable with spooks being on air. And they give these guys this kind of credence, this level of, you know, they give this guy this level of credence associated with it. This is not where Democrats were. I don't think they realized how far off the reservation they've gone. A party that used to be, I think Mark used to call it the cool party. They used to like pot. They used to be anti-establishment. They used to be against the wars. That used to be very skeptical of intelligence and spooks. I mean, keep in mind, spooks were the ones that were trying to get Martin Luther King to kill himself. You had people who believed that the CIA murdered Kennedy. Like, meaning you had a party or elements of the party that used to be skeptical to this stuff that now is establishment as establishment can be. It is bizarre. And I don't think they realize how far off the reservation they have gone to what a Democrat was versus whatever the hell a Democrat is now. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And if we look at what's happening, what the Democratic, again, it's not a political party. You know, something we were talking about a second ago, this octopus of regime change and neoliberal, neoconservative machine that USAID, the CIA, and the Democratic Party, they all have these work together, whether it's websites and news organizations and all of this kind of stuff, right? And the Democratic Party has just become an expression, the political faux political expression of that thing. You know, John Bolton writing articles, oh, everybody's got to vote for Kamala Harris, right? Yep. So the Democratic Party is the political expression of this kind of imperialist international regime change machine thing that's kind of being dismantled in a way, maybe not completely, but in a way it's being dismantled, but it's very, very dangerous. And I believe that the really, really rich people are bringing it to heel, that it ain't just Trump because they rub him out. But I do believe that a lot of the really rich people are saying that things gotten out of hand and it's okay if we use this to go after the poor people and the nobodies. But this is our dog, and our dog is not allowed to bite us on the ankles. And it started going after some of the wrong rich people, powerful people, going after Zuckerberg, going after Musk. It's going after the billionaires, and they're like, time out. We own this thing. The CIA was started by Wall Street. You think you're on your own. You ain't on your own, and you're getting ready to learn that because Trump couldn't take it apart. They'd kill him. We've seen that before. But the powers that be are taking it apart, and it's probably a good thing. And now it's being exposed for what it is. And man, the more you do, can I share something with you real quick?
Please.
I'm going to try to share something on the. Let me find it on the screen. Just an example, right? I'm going to put it there. You can.
There we are. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Look at this. See this? In 2020, when Tulsi Gabbard said she was running, remember that? And I said, "Oh, I'm going to go to Hawaii because I want to see, her announce." Right. So this experts who track websites and social media links linked to Russia have seen stirrings of a possible campaign of support. Right. You go down this.
So outrageous.
Watch this. Watch this. Oh, look at that. Because Lee Stranahan and I were talking, and I said, yeah, and we had a discussion. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war. She's going to shake things up a little. That's all we said. She's going to, and I said, hey, I think it's good because she's going to shake things up. And immediately the machine came out and took that little thing, two schmucks on K Street with, how many people were really listening? Not all, but so many. We did the best we could. They took that and made an entire campaign about it to say the Russians have chosen Tulsi Gabbard, right?
That's so outrageous.
What was that? That was that machine. They didn't have much. They're like, what do we have to go after Tulsi Gabbard? We got some idiot on Sputnik said he likes her. That's all we got. Let's run with it. But the interesting thing was that happened in like 24 hours. It was everywhere.
It was fast.
In Europe. It was in Australia. It was all. And I'm like, how did that? Well, now we see. This is what this machine is. I think some realities about it are being unearthed. And I think it goes to Congress if they keep digging way deep into
Oh
Congress.
God, man, I hope they keep digging.
And if I was
really
Trump, you
do.
know what I would do? I would sue every one of those, not just charge them. I'd sue every one of them because, I mean, legally, think about it. Particularly because of their expertise, right? But legally, their voice has a lot of weight, right? And when people like, oh, well, the guy from the CIA, he said it, and they knew it. That's what they used. They used the weight of their expertise,
Yes,
which
they did.
means legally they have a right to do their due diligence to make sure that what they're saying is correct. You are using the fact that I am a former CIA leader. You're using that as weight to make what I'm saying credible with a minimum, no evidence. They literally, the article said, we have no evidence, right? Which means I have a legal duty to do my due diligence to make sure if I'm saying this, I better be able to support it. But we now know based on this, that the only due diligence they had was, hey, this will help Joe Biden.
Yep.
Now, let me add this. Donald Trump said, I was robbed. Doesn't he kind of have an argument now, a legal argument?
Oh,
that he
look,
was robbed?
I
And
thought
can
he-
he go back and sue everybody, the government, this guy has like $1 trillion lawsuit against the government because we can now look at it and say, there's pretty strong evidence that he was an attempt. Now, whether or not you can argue that he was or wasn't robbed, you can clearly see that there was an attempt made to rob him. And that all of those charges against him, what happens when they start digging into Alvin Bragg and the prosecutors and discussions between USAID, the CIA, and what was said to the prosecutors? And we find out, which we will if they look into it, that whole thing was orchestrated by the intelligence community. It's the greatest coup. Two preemptive coups. Both times they did a preemptive coup.
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling what they're unearthing here, man.
Well, I hope they keep digging.
Yeah.
I don't want them to do this in this kind of political bias way, but I definitely want them to keep digging. I want them, I find it to be outrageous. Donald Trump, if instead of him screaming fraud, he would have pointed out they changed the results of the election by effectively lying to the American public en masse on the debate stage. Because it's like, if the American public was given this kind of honest assessment of, yeah, Joe Biden was using his name for influence peddling, which is what Donald Trump was trying to make the point of, talking about the laptop and using the laptop as his justification for it. And you get these guys saying, well, look, we're part of the CIA. We're part of intelligence. All 51 of us are part of it. And based on our understanding and our experience, what Donald Trump's saying here is not true. That was the entire point of what they did on that debate stage when Blinken got all of those quote unquote intelligence officials to sign on to that letter. I'm saying that you're right. They did affect the results of the election by lying en masse on the debate stage with all of the other media organizations falling behind that particular lie over the course of the next year, even though they knew in 2019 that laptop was legitimate. It's outrageous.
They had the laptop.
They had the laptop
For like 10 months. And they literally went to the press and went to social media and said, if anybody says there's a laptop and it's Hunter Biden and there's bad stuff, it's Russian disinformation. And you have to censor it, and we'd be happy to help you censor it.
I mean, the guy was showing dick pic.
And
nobody
had
asked him. It's like, hey, Hunter, is that your dick in that dick pic? Is that you having sex with that prostitute? Is that you on crack? Like, where did they think those images came from? Did they really believe that all of the images in that database were deep fakes? Like, they could have just asked him, hey, Hunter, is this yours? And obviously the answer was,
well, how about this? The only reason they got it, because a guy called the FBI from a computer shop and said, I got Hunter Biden's laptop. I keep calling him to come get it. He won't come get it. Will you come get it? And he had to call him twice. So they knew the origin of it. Did they go interview him to find out if he was a Russian spy? Apparently, they never suspected him of being a Russian spy. They had no connection between that laptop and anything else other than absolute truth. And they cooked up a lie. And they censored based on that lie. It is the word. And now we find out this thing. Oh, what a tangled web we weave, right?
One last thing, Kamala Harris. Now, I haven't seen this video, so I'll say that. But this is apparently one of the clips that they did not show. Because if you remember, Donald Trump sued the news organization, effectively saying, dude, you did an interview and you cut out all of these parts of the interview that were less flattering. I'll put it that way for Harris. This is one of the clips that came up. I haven't seen this clip yet, so this reaction is going to be on the fly.
Madam Vice President, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Good to be with you.
Can't hear if it's been not very loud. Is it a way to turn it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You me talking?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can hear it.
Well, we were talking about how you're going to pay for it, and I mean, I truly do mean it. Your plans are logical, make logical sense. The way Washington works is not logical. So how are you going to convince a divided Congress that what you say, your plans, are something that they should all agree to and provide to the American people when they've shown no inclination to do that up to this point?
Is that what you needed?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
By the way, to interrupt real quick, not a horrible question, right?
No, that's certainly.
I mean, mind, it's not horrible if you ask Donald Trump the same question, which for whatever reason, they don't ask Republicans questions like this. But like, hey, you have these ideas. Joe Biden had ideas. You're going to have to get this through Congress if indeed you're going to put it out. Meaning, if I say, I'm going to put a man on Jupiter, okay, you could say that. But then you have to, on some level, explain how you're going to put the man on Jupiter. Kamala Harris's plans weren't that expansive, which is why I find this line of logic to be absurd. But whatever. You asked her the question, how are you going to get it through Congress? Let's hear Harris's response.
36 of sound space room time.
I can't even tell if she's speaking. Wait a minute.
His hands are moving.
Cameras are off.
How will you?
It's going to be taxes. It's going to be literally the economists. I mean, they're from each spectrum.
But I hear what you're saying
Yeah.
about the economists. This is true.
Yeah.
But Congress is not the economists.
I know, but
It sounds like either she didn't want to answer that question, because it seems like in silence, they were having this kind of behind the scenes conversation about how they were going to answer it. Eventually, she finally got the chance to answer. It was like, I guess she didn't really have a good answer for that
She
question.
didn't understand, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's like,
she
how do you
didn't
pay
really
for it?
understand the question. You know what I mean? Did she sound like kind of intellectually lost?
It sounds like she didn't want to answer.
We couldn't, but
Yeah.
the economists, like
like,
she was looking for words. And you know what else? It sounds also like there was somebody in the background coaching her.
Yes, that's my point. When that silence, there's a part of this clip where they seem to be silent, but they're not really silent. Something is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So how are you going to
Where-
convince a divided Congress
So right here,
that what
he
you
asked her the
say,
question,
your plans,
how do you get this to a divided Congress? Meaning, are you just telling people pie in the sky? Or do you have a real
Right.
plan?
It's a reasonable political question.
And let me see right here.
Is that what you needed?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. 36 of sound space room time.
Yes, something's going on
You
behind
see
the
her
scenes.
turn. And then they just sit there.
It's almost like they must be saying something behind the scenes. Like
Yeah.
either they're trying to come to some determination of whether she's going to answer
how
this.
will you?
Yeah,
And
see,
then you see
something
the
like that
person
happen.
walk by and you see people moving around.
the economists.
She's been coached.
I mean, they're from each
I
spectrum.
but I hear what you're saying
Yeah.
about the economists. This is true.
Yeah.
But Congress is not the economists.
Yeah, she's been coached. And she's like, well, the economists say so and so. Look, man, I could come up with a plan that economists love. He's asking her a different question. How do you get that to Congress? I guess that's my issue with this. Look, the question is legit, right? I guess my issue with this is if you're sitting there having a conversation with Donald Trump, are you going to ask Trump the same thing? How are you going to get this through Congress? Whatever that it is. I've never heard anybody ask Donald Trump, how are you going to pay for it, even though his plans balloon the budget, or how are you going to get this stuff through Congress? It never comes up.
Well,
That's the only issue with that question, right?
Yeah.
I'm fine with the question. The question is fine. How? Because otherwise you can say anything. I'm going to give people a $50 increase in their minimum wage. Okay, that sounds nice. How are you going to do that? Okay, don't worry about how I'm going to do it. That's what my plans are. Meaning you can come up with all sorts of plans. Everybody's going to have health care. Everybody's going to have a pony. Everybody is going to be able to go to the moon for $50. You can say whatever you want to say. The catch becomes, okay, how do you get this through if indeed these are your plans? So I have no issue with the question, but the question should be universal to both candidates. And I've never heard that question asked to Donald Trump. Also, as you pointed out, it's a bit weird that she's being coached during the interview, as opposed to I ask the question, she gives me a response. I ask the question, she gives me a response. It's not that. He asked the question and then everybody paused and they seemed to have conversations on whether or not this was a question she was going to answer, finally coming to, okay, now you can answer the question after apparently somebody was talking to you in your ear. It's a very weird way to have an interview.
Does it give you, I'll put it like this, and here's the thing, I'll say this. Whatever questions they ask Donald Trump, you may not like the answers and they might not even make sense, but he gives you like a confident answer. And afterwards you might be like, oh, that's a crappy answer. But Trump, he says, let me tell you what we're going to do. And then he said something about the border and you're like, well, that's not related to it. But he's going to give, he's going to give you an answer. And it probably going to be about whatever the hell he wants to talk about. He's going to ignore your question, right? Which I can respect that because that's what politicians do. Yeah, come on, politicians have been doing that as long as there's been politicians. What was distressing about that was her inability to really understand, what she needed to do and how she needed to answer the question. She seemed confused. And the other thing was the coaching implied to me that they'd already talked to NBC and they'd already said, look, if she gets hung up, if she has a problem, we're going to help her out. And you guys got to be ready to cut and paste this thing as necessary. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't do that unless you already knew that NBC was working with you and that they were going to cut this thing and paste it as necessary. Otherwise, you wouldn't be wandering around the set in the middle of it. They're literally, you got a 60 minutes interview and people are wandering past the cameras. Why? Because they already know that it's going to be cut and pasted, but she was completely lost about it. It was a sad state of affairs. And I say this, they got to settle. NBC has to settle with Trump. They have no choice. And this is the issue. The issue is not the case. This is always the issue. The issue is discovery. What happens if Trump sues and he starts deposing these people, asking, at any time, did someone tell you that they would cut it up? And it starts, NBC, the court says we need every email. And they start getting emails that say, what are we going to do? How do we stop Trump? Well, how can we use this? Boy, she really screwed this up. We can't let this go because she'll lose. And we got to help her win. What happens in discovery if they start getting things that are so outrageous that NBC will be ripped to pieces? You know what I'm saying? So they have to settle it. You've got these people saying, why is NBC or CBS News settling with Trump? They should just fight it. They cannot allow the internal emails to fall into the hands of the prosecutors under discovery. A lot of people have settled lawsuits, and I've seen it where people have settled lawsuits not because they thought they'd lose the lawsuit, but because under discovery, the things that would have come out would have been so embarrassing that it would be far more damaging to them as a news organization or as some or whatever. You might have some dirt that you've done. I'm just saying, if you're being sued in your company that's so bad that you're like, crap, that'd be worse than losing a lawsuit. Pay the man. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the issue with and he can, man, the number of people that Donald Trump can sue now, if he ain't a billionaire, which I'm not sure whether he is or not, he will be when he gets finished suing all of these people. It's crazy. But it also, man, I am, you know what? I don't get shocked easy, but I am in shock over some of the things that I already suspected, but the things that you're seeing now, you're just like, oh my God. You know what I'm really shocked about? Let me ask if this is you. I think we might already covered it. Not that all this stuff happened, but I never thought it would come out. I never thought this stuff would come out. That's the shock.
The thing that has shocked me more than anything else was this focus on USA and the revealing of it. Everybody, you and I and people who pay attention to this stuff knew that NED, USA, many of these NGOs were effectively getting money from the State Department to affect policy that the CIA would typically do. So instead of having CIA as the group or the power behind it, you can have these aid groups working almost as a proxy for CIA interests to overthrow governments and everything else. That was understood. by a lot of people. Usually, though, that goes unspoken. That's not something that you usually say. It's impolite to point out that we were overthrowing governments and using these organizations to create color revolutions in countries that we didn't necessarily like in order to change those countries' policies. That was something we knew, it just wasn't spoken. The moment that Trump got rid of USAID, all of a sudden that stuff hit the headlines. And they started being very open and outspoken about the fact that this group has been used to overthrow governments. And you can look at what was happening in Georgia and those protests. We had a hand in that. You can look at the annulment of the Romanian election. We seem to have a hand in that. We can look at the overthrow of the Yanukovych government in Ukraine in 2014. We had a hand in that. Meaning this group, this quote unquote aid, has been going all throughout the world to affect the US policy, not just in overthrowing governments, but also using media in those countries to affect US policy. That is astonishing. It's not that they were doing it, as you pointed out, it's the fact that it was outed. They had to out it in order to even go at it in the first place. Meaning you have to tarnish this thing in order to get rid of it. It's the fact that they were able to out the fact that we have been overthrowing governments and we've been using this device to do so. That is shocking.
I want to see the emails between CIA intelligence and the so-called intelligence officials that were like on MSNBC.
Yeah.
Like what was going back and forth between John Brennan and the Clapper and the guy Bash and all of these other people, all of those emails that were between them and various media outlets, the leaks, the New York Times, the etc. You know what I mean? What was going on? Because isn't it starting to get obvious that the same damn thing that was going, that they jumped the shark, they crossed the line, that it was now clearly Operation Mockingbird on steroids. And they were just like, okay, in the CIA, let's have a meeting. What do we want to go on MSNBC today? Nah, we'll put this on MSNBC. This goes to the New York Times. Yeah, but we got a story coming out in the Washington Post. How do we mix that with such and such? Send this to whoever, The View, whatever. I mean, we know it. It's clear it was going on now. It's pretty.
Yeah, they've had serious influence.
And how do you even do a church committee when this comes back? It'll rip Congress to pieces. It'll rip Congress to pieces. At least the Democratic Party, and probably the Lindsey Grahams and some of the Democrats, the Liz Cheneys, some of the Republicans that went. It'll rip them to pieces. How about if we find out what's the guy that they went after who was from that they Trump, one of the first people that Trump nominated, and
Flynn?
they said no this time, and they said he was investigated for having sex with an underage girl. Was it Matt Gaetz?
Oh, I know you're talking about Gates. Yeah,
I
Matt
bet
Gates.
they start looking at intelligence and what have you, that was the operation against Matt Gaetz with the FBI and all of it. I guarantee.
Well, to be fair, Matt Gaetz, that stuff had been out there for a long time.
Exactly.
I mean, that's been out there for like over.
But I guarantee there was an operation. We got to stop Matt Gaetz, and the part of it was, you know what I mean? They were involved in everything. Pretty hard finding. I mean, no, I feel really happy
gotta be
right
honest,
now.
man. I am here for this.
Yeah,
I don't like these people, and I definitely don't like the subversive nonsense of trying to affect. Because, and I'll end it on this. A lot of people may not remember this, but one of the last things that Obama did was to legalize propaganda to the U.S., meaning he legalized what it called Smith-Mundt Act, I believe it's called, that effectively allowed propaganda to be used against Americans on American soil under this idea of fighting disinformation from other governments. Okay, you just legalized lying to the American public. Now they would say, well, no, this has to do with Radio Free Europe, because that stuff wasn't allowed in the United States. You weren't allowed to have just raw, outright propaganda directed at the US government. Did they do it? Yes. Was it legal? No. It's legal now. And I think what we're seeing are the ramifications of Obama doing that. Keep in mind, laws are interpreted. It's not like somebody writes something down and that's just the end of it. It's this kind of flat thing that the person wrote down. Oftentimes those things are interpreted by the administration that comes in and the way that the administration operates. And if you interpret the Smith-Mundt Act as, oh, we can now propagandize to the American public, then that's what they're going to do. That's what Joe Biden did. And we'll see how Trump does it. But Trump has been more honest on a lot of this stuff, even though it's freaking people out. It's like, dude, the previous president was doing the same thing. We can end it on
Boy, are
this.
these,
Garland, give me your last
boy,
take.
are the Democrats going to have egg on their face. Oh my God. It appears that I think there's going to be prosecutions. Boy, I don't know what to say. You can see, you know me, I run my mouth all the time and I'm left speechless.
I'm here for that. I'm here for all of this. I find this to be a reckoning. And no, I don't have this belief that Donald Trump is doing this for egalitarian reasons. I don't believe he's loving light. I don't believe any of that stuff. But something needs to fundamentally change. And the way that they engage with even media, the way they engage with the American public, something needs to change. We'll see what
Hey, they
comes
got
out
us
of it.
fired. These people got us fired. We had jobs that we enjoyed. We did a good job. We were honest. We did the best we could, and they got us fired. And that was the machine that got us fired. I'm thrilled. I'll be getting a cup of tea and some popcorn watching these people roast.
Garland Nixon, my man. Thank you for this, Garland. I always appreciate you coming on, man. I really do.
Thank you very
Garland
much.
Nixon, he is host of the Garland Nixon Show. He's on YouTube. Also, Garland is all over the place. Garland, where can people find you? Are you still on Twitter? My Twitter account has been destroyed. So if I don't.
They gave you the business too, most likely.
I still don't have it. And you can't contact anybody on it.
They gave you they took you out. Don't worry, I can get something happened to. But yeah, they took you out. They took you out. That's all it was. It's the old, come on, Twitter. Oh, we don't know who you are. It's not plausible.
It is deeply frustrating, to put it mildly. But Garland, where can people find you? Just so people would know.
Just on Facebook, I'm there, and my I'm YouTube Rock Fan Rubble.
Okay. All right. My man, thank you for this, Garland. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Garland Nixon, the man, the legend. Love that guy. Garland was the one that got me into radio, and he would have my appreciation from here to the last breath that I take on this planet. Deeply appreciate Garland and everything that he's done. In fact, I think he got a few people to join on the radio show, even though I think I might have been did he get anybody else hired? I'm not sure, but Garland is right. These people took our jobs. I mean, in real terms, like, look, I don't know what they do at other media stations. I can tell you at Sputnik, our job was just to get it right. We have come to this weird spot. How do I explain this? In the old days, they would say, okay, this is Russian propaganda. And they would say the Russians are just making it up. And then when you get something like RT of Sputnik, now I can't really speak for RT because I was on RT few and far between. I can talk to Sputnik because I knew many of the teams. I worked on 2 of those teams. I created Political Misfits with Bob Schlehuber. Him and I created it together. And Garland, who created Fault Lines, I end up taking the position of Garland on Fault Lines. Garland ends up moving to Critical Hour. So between Fault Lines, Critical Hour, Political Misfits, those are 3 shows. 3 shows that I know quite well. Those people were just Americans. And those people were just Americans with a point of view. There was no pushing. There was no cajoling. There was no, you must report the story. That didn't exist. What existed was people having points of view who would just so happen to be Americans. And with the company, if the company had a bias, that bias had more to do with this notion of anti-war. It wasn't a political bias, meaning it wasn't a bias in the sense of you talk about this as a Democrat, or you talk about this as a Republican, or you talk about this in a form. It wasn't that. It was more so about war and whether you were okay with this notion of war and conflict. And if there was any commonality, the commonality was many of the people who you were engaging were just anti-war. It didn't stop us from having people who were pro-NATO. It didn't stop us from having people on who were pro-Israel. Those usually were fights. But nonetheless, we would have those conversations. What people don't quite get today, it's a propaganda in the way that they talk about it is a relative term. We've gone beyond this notion of, okay, you have a point of view, and that point of view is true for you. And even if I take you as being given that point of view in good faith, I need on some level to accept that your experience in this reality frame may give you a different assessment and a different point of view in regards to what you care about, what you think is important, or for that matter, what you think your priorities are. On some level, either do I accept that or do I not accept that? Meaning, you could be completely right in what you're saying. I could have a different point of view and be completely right in what I'm saying. And if I am a decent person, I can acknowledge the fact that you just have that different point of view. And we somehow try to make inroads into how we manage this in order to avoid conflict. That's not where we are today. The moment that I take a different point of view, I'm all of a sudden spewing propaganda, or I am coming up with a perspective that you don't necessarily like, that's contradicting a narrative that you yourself are putting out. The US and the media space in the US, and for that matter, the political space, have gotten so insecure that they cannot accept any other point of view outside of their own, despite the fact that many times their point of view is just wrong. They're just lying. When they say an unprovoked war of aggression by Russia, okay, was it really unprovoked? Was it really unprovoked? You expanded a hostile military organization to the border of a country, acting as if, well, we're just loving life. We're just loving life. We just found out that the media organizations all throughout the world were effectively being paid by the US State Department, by US tax money. So the points of view that many of these places were airing was effectively coming out of the US State Department, especially in Ukraine, where 90% was coming out of the US State Department. I'm trying to point out how they've gotten so insecure on this issue of, we have a narrative, we need to promote that narrative, and anything that contradicts that narrative, even if the contradiction is true, we are going to call propaganda. Our job was just to tell the truth. That's it. When we had meetings, we would have these kind of discussions, these political discussions, and people would have different points of view in the political discussions. Malik and I have a different point of view in regards to politics. Malik wasn't heavily into foreign policy. He started to get more into it as the show went on, because that was something that we effectively covered. He had an interesting arc, because in the very beginning, Malik's thing was like, I don't believe the US government will behave this way. By the end, he had completely changed that assessment, because there was no way to avoid what you were looking at when you're working at a station like that. Well, if you're working at MSNBC, for example, your world is effectively whatever Democrats tell you and want you to know. And so they're going to give you the liberal point of view on everything. It's entirely reflective or reactive to whatever Donald Trump is doing. That was not our job. Our job was to cover media all across the world. So yeah, we would talk about Sudan. We would talk about Africa and the countries of Africa, the Sahel regions, for example. We talk about North Korea. We'll talk about South Korea. We'll talk about China. We'll talk about Russia. We'll talk about Ukraine. We'll talk about all of that stuff. And so you can imagine, when you're perched at the edge of the world and you're looking at all of it, your assessment is not going to be something that is very specific to an individual country, because you're looking at it from a world's perspective. So by definition of being perched at the edge of the world, I'm not going to have a take that is purely an American point of view. It's not going to be this American spin on whatever we're talking about, because we're looking at it from a world's perspective, a humanitarian perspective. What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be a human being? And in the context of what it means to be a human being, not just a human being, but a good human being, how do you evaluate what you're looking at? And if you're evaluating US policy and you're seeing, okay, well, they're trying to overthrow this government. They're trying to knock over Ukraine. They're trying to undercut Russia. They're trying to knock over Slovakia. They're trying to knock over Georgia. They're trying to overthrow South Korea, and potentially even use South Korean troops into Ukraine, which is the reason why they were kind of that nonsense about North Koreans in Ukraine. When you see that, how do you turn away from that and come away with it with something other than, oh my God, look at what my country is doing. Look at what my country is funding. Look at the people it's getting killed. Look at the countries it's invading. How do you come to an assessment, if you're being an honest person perched at the edge of the world in that way, and not point out what you see? They would say, well, that's propaganda. I would say, I'm giving you an assessment of reality based on what's happening. And I can show the reports that point it out. I can show the media that points it out. I can show you the events on the ground as they are taking place. And the media may be in all sorts of different media sources. It may be Indian media, Chinese media, Russian media, Iranian media, US media, whether it's New York Times, Washington Post, New York Post, whatever. We followed it all, which is the reason why our assessments were more right than what you would ever see coming out of mainstream media. We were more right. We were more accurate. And we were more accurate more often because we didn't have this stupid fucking American spin that continuously misinformed the American population. Garland is right. They got rid of our jobs. They didn't get rid of our jobs because we were doing a bad job. They got rid of our jobs because we were doing a good job. And what's sad about that is that they did this still screaming this idea of we believe in independent media and we believe in free media. They're out of their goddamn minds. It is very frustrating. It has thrown life into a bit of calamity. I'm going to be moving, actually. I have a place where I'm going to go for the next month, at least. I'm going to be in Virginia for the time being. In fact, I'm going to end this one a little bit early today because I need to move my luggage out of this place and moving into the next place. I got to be honest, I don't know what the place looks like. I'm going to set up for tomorrow, though, whatever it looks like. Hopefully, it's not going to be too bad. And the show will continue. The show will keep moving on. Yes, I was screaming a lot today, deeply frustrated by what is taking place. Believe it or not, I'm less frustrated by what is taking place, and I'm more frustrated with the response to what's taking place. This idea that Democrats are now standing on a soapbox screaming about what Donald Trump is doing in Gaza is outrageous. It's outrageous. That screaming should have been taking place as it was happening, not after the fact. And now that Trump is in office, now they feel like, okay, now we have license for us to complain. We have license to point to a genocide taking place. We have license to point to ethnic cleansing taking place. And my response to that is shut the F up. You should have been taking that stance as it was happening with your president, as your president was doing it. But they didn't want to do that. And so now that Kamala Harris is lost, now that Joe Biden has signed some kind of contract for some kind of acting career, whatever the hell he plans on doing, now they're free to point out the genocide that was a genocide for the last 15 months under their president, backed by all of them. Fucking outrageous. It's fucking outrageous. Juanita Mitchell, yeah, Jamal, you're so right. Wolfman Green and Democrats are so hypocritical. Yeah, I call the man Wolfman. That's so wrong. It's so wrong. That's so wrong. But fair enough, I own it. Shelly H. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Shelly. This show will be demonetized. So anything that you guys give effectively pays for the show. Skeptical Jerk, genocide has been going on since the creation of Israel. Well, look, their job has been to ethnically cleanse that area, right? I mean, the entire point was Greater Israel, to expand into the other areas, to take over more and more territory. And so, yeah, from their point of view, they didn't want. Again, I've been pointing this out early on when that started. I've been completely right. I've been shown to be right. And for all of this talk about us giving propaganda, do you realize that in media organizations, there were all sorts of pressure being applied to people who was pointing this out, myself included? If you remember Brianna Joy Gray, she lost her job. She was working on Rising. She was very strong on this issue of Gaza. She got fired over that issue. I nearly got fired over that issue because, you know, when you're going very hard on that issue and you're pointing out, dude, they're lying about the beheaded babies. They're lying about all of these rapes. They're lying about much of this stuff in order to create a pretext or justification for whatever murder and everything else they commit. The media organization that you're working for is like, ooh, 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 ooh. Oh, that's uncomfortable for us to say, even if it's true. Even if it's true. Yeah, I had gotten to the point where I packed all my bags. I packed my desk, and I assumed that at the point where the story comes up again, that I would just get fired. It just so happens that they ended the job before I got fired. Serenity now. Serenity now. Look, it's very possible that I would have lost my job either way, but it's secondary to the point of being fired, not for doing something wrong, but doing something right. And for the US government to be that insecure, where they would do this kind of in run around the First Amendment to eliminate jobs is outrageous. It's outrageous. But look, nevertheless, I'm still doing my show. That's not going to change. If I get another radio position, the show is not changing. I'm keeping my show. I'm never going to do this thing again of giving up the show to do something else. Fuck that. It is too much of a pain in the ass to try to get all of the stuff revved up again. And it bugs me a bit because I get the sense that if I would have kept going, I guess it's not true. I mean, truth is, and I'll end it on this. I learned a lot working on the radio station. And I learned a lot in a way that I could have never learned had I not been on a radio station. I love that job. That job felt natural as natural can be, having this kind of platform. It was aggravating where you have this kind of, it's Russian media stuff, because even when you're right, and you're right more often than anybody else, you don't get the credit for it, at the very least in the United States, that you deserve when you get the story right. As opposed to, let's say, doing my own platform, in which case you're doing your own platform, your point of view is your own, but my point of view is always my own. It's just different. There's no fog over you when you're doing your own show. Your point of view is your point of view is your point of view. And when you're working for another network, even though your point of view is your point of view is your point of view, it's not seen that way. Nevertheless, I love my job. That was the best job of my life, hands down, unequivocally. Yeah, and those fuckers took it. Those fuckers took it. All right, I'm going to end this because I need to get this luggage up. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning, God willing. I think that's everything. You all have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 90. Signing off. Have a good one, all.